Most people don't fail because they're weak. They fail because they're waiting to feel strong. That's the lie. The modern world teaches you that motivation comes first, that you should find your passion, find your purpose, find the perfect morning routine, find the right productivity system, and then you'll finally become disciplined. But a man named Musashi spent most of his life walking through blood-soaked battlefields, sleeping in forests, and fighting opponents who wanted him dead. He never talked about motivation, not once, because when a sword is inches from your throat, motivation becomes irrelevant. Only action remains. And that's where everything changed for me, because for years I was trapped in the same cycle, the cycle you've probably experienced yourself. You set a goal, you get excited, you watch videos, read books, buy courses, create plans. For a few days, maybe even a few weeks, you feel unstoppable. But eventually something happens. You wake up tired, the excitement fades, life gets busy, progress slows down, and suddenly the goal that once felt important begins collecting dust. Then comes the worst part. You don't just lose the goal, you lose trust in yourself. You begin seeing yourself as the kind of person who quits, the kind of person who never finishes, the kind of person who starts strong and disappears halfway through. And after enough repetitions, you stop chasing big goals altogether, not because you can't achieve them, but because you've convinced yourself that you won't. History has seen this cycle before, thousands of times, but it looked different back then. Today, we quit businesses, quit workouts, quit learning skills. But 400 years ago, men quit battles. They abandoned missions. They surrendered kingdoms. The stakes were different. The psychology was exactly the same. Fear, discomfort, doubt. Humans haven't changed much, only the scenery has. Therefore, if we want answers to modern problems, sometimes we have to look backward. And whenever people talk about discipline, one name inevitably emerges from the fog of history: Miyamoto Musashi, the undefeated samurai, the man who survived more than 60 duels, the wanderer who became a legend. But most people misunderstand Musashi. They imagine an unstoppable warrior born with superhuman determination. History suggests something else. Musashi understood something about human nature that most people spend their entire lives missing. And the older I get, the more I think he was right. Because motivation is a feeling, and feelings are weather. Some days the sky is clear, some days it's a storm. But imagine building your entire future around the weather. Imagine only working when the sun appears. How much would ever get done? Not much. Musashi lived in a world where waiting for the right feeling could get you killed. Therefore, he trained himself to act regardless of how he felt. This sounds simple, almost too simple, but simplicity is often where the deepest truths hide. Think about your own goals. You probably know what to do. Most people do. The problem isn't information. The internet solved that years ago. The problem is execution. You know you should exercise. You know you should study. You know you should build the thing you've been postponing. But information keeps colliding with emotion, and emotion keeps winning. Musashi noticed this battle long before psychology had names for it. He understood that emotions are terrible leaders, useful advisors, terrible leaders. Therefore, he built his life around something stronger: habit, repetition, practice, not inspiration. The strange thing about repetition is that it feels insignificant while you're doing it. One workout changes nothing. One page changes nothing. One day of discipline changes nothing. But history is not shaped by dramatic moments. History is shaped by accumulated moments, tiny actions repeated for years. A tree doesn't become enormous overnight. A mountain isn't formed in a weekend. Everything powerful grows slowly, but modern minds hate slow growth. We've become addicted to immediate results, immediate entertainment, immediate validation, immediate rewards. Therefore, patience feels like suffering. Musashi lived in a completely different reality. He spent decades sharpening one single craft. Decades. Imagine telling someone today that mastery might take 20 years. Most would leave before hearing the explanation. because we're conditioned to think speed equals success, but speed often creates fragility, and fragility breaks under pressure. Musashi knew this, therefore he focused on becoming unbreakable instead of becoming fast, and that's where I began seeing my own mistakes. For years, I treated goals like emotional experiences. I wanted to feel inspired, I wanted momentum, I wanted certainty, but every one of those things comes and goes. The moment I felt tired, I slowed down. The moment I felt uncertain, I hesitated. The moment I felt discouraged, I stopped. I wasn't following a goal, I was following my mood, and moods are terrible navigators. Then I came across a principle hidden inside Musashi's philosophy. A principle so obvious that most people ignore it. Do not depend on a particular feeling, depend on a particular action. At first, it sounded almost disappointingly simple, but simplicity survives because it works. Think about the sun. It rises every day, not because it's motivated, not because it's inspired, not because it feels ready. It rises because that's what it does. Consistency creates reliability, reliability creates trust, and trust creates power. The same thing happens inside your own mind. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you strengthen trust. Every time you break one, you weaken it. Eventually, your self-image becomes a reflection of those repeated votes, not what you intend, what you repeatedly do. That's why so many people feel stuck. They're trying to change their lives while repeatedly proving the opposite to themselves. The evidence doesn't match the ambition. Musashi understood that identity follows action, not the other way around. You don't become disciplined and then take disciplined actions. You take disciplined actions and gradually become disciplined. The order matters a lot because it removes the waiting. No more waiting to feel confident. No more waiting to feel motivated. No more waiting for the perfect time. You act first. The feelings catch up later. History repeats this lesson constantly. Farmers understood it, craftsmen understood it, warriors understood it, but modern life keeps distracting us from it. We're surrounded by shortcuts, surrounded by promises, surrounded by systems claiming to eliminate effort, but effort isn't the problem. Meaningless effort is. Purposeful effort transforms people. Therefore, the question isn't how to avoid difficulty. The question is whether you're willing to walk through it long enough for it to change you. Musashi was. That's why people still remember his name centuries later, not because he was perfect, not because he never struggled, but because he kept moving, again and again and again. Which brings me to the part that changed my life. It wasn't a technique, it wasn't a productivity hack, it wasn't a morning routine, it was a realization. I had spent years treating consistency as a consequence. Musashi treated consistency as a decision, a daily decision, sometimes exciting, usually boring, often uncomfortable, but always available. The goal was never to feel unstoppable, the goal was to become someone who continues anyway. That's the difference, because eventually, every goal becomes difficult, every dream becomes repetitive, every path becomes lonely. The excitement leaves, the novelty disappears, the applause fades, but the work remains. It always remains. And that's where most people quit, not at the beginning, not in the middle, but in the ordinary days, the silent days, the boring days, the days where nobody notices. Musashi's answer wasn't to eliminate those days. His answer was to expect them, prepare for them, walk through them, because those days aren't obstacles, they are the path. And once I understood that, something strange happened. I stopped obsessing over outcomes. I stopped chasing motivation. I stopped asking whether I felt ready. I simply returned to the work, one day at a time. The goal didn't become easier, but I became harder to stop. Maybe that's what Musashi understood all along. Not how to win, not how to stay motivated, but how to become the kind of person who doesn't leave when things get difficult. And if history teaches us anything, it's this. The people who change their lives are rarely the most talented, rarely the smartest, rarely the most motivated. they're usually the ones who stayed long after everyone else went home.